So, this is the first screencast and the first flipped lecture that I'm doing for this class, and so you have to be nice and say that you liked it. Flipping the classroom, we're going to do the lecture at home, so we have time for activities and other stuff in the classroom that I think will benefit both me and both you as a student. So we're going to have maybe 2-3 15-minute sections for this lecture, and then it's beneficial for you to read also, because the lectures definitely can't cover everything, or else I'd be talking for like an hour and a half, and that's way too long to sit and listen to my voice. Okay, so first flipped lecture, we're going to look at Chapter 2, the Constitution. And we're going to look at a few things: origins of the Constitution, government that failed, which means the Articles of Confederation. We're going to look at making a new Constitution, some issues that they came up with. We're going to look at this Madisonian system, and ratifying and changing the Constitution, and then we're going to see if we're understanding the Constitution. Okay, everyone saw that email. We're going to look at the notion of higher law, by which the colonists felt they were entitled to certain natural rights, okay, rights that aren't given by government, natural rights. And then we'll look at some other objectives, like the shortcomings of the Articles of Confederation. We're going to compare and contrast the New Jersey plan to the Virginia plan when they were making the new Constitution. And a couple other things. We're going to look at two types of constitutional reform that are advocated today, along with specific reform measures. So, in the summer of 1776, and Thomas Jefferson is writing the Declaration of Independence with a few other guys, but he's the main author. They're doing a very radical thing. They are talking about a rebellion, really, to overthrow the government, which is the English king and parliament. To attempt to overthrow a government is totally a serious offense, and it's a serious offense in the United States right now. And it was a serious offense back then. If they never won the revolution, they probably all would have been hung. So it was a very radical thing that they were doing. So anyways, let's talk about that revolution and the road to it. The colonists faced taxes after the French and Indian War, and they didn't like that because they didn't have any representation in English Parliament. So they said, taxation without representation. That was like their clear motto back then. So leaders, formed what they called the Continental Congress to address the abuses of the English Crown. The English Crown really didn't listen. They taxed, and then they repealed the tax, and then they would tax again, repeal the tax. And the colonists weren't very happy about it because they had to pay a lot of money. And the reason why was because England's land after 1763, after the French and Indian War, was massive. So they had to pretty much try and tell the colonists that they had to stay on the coast, so they didn't have to spend a lot of money fighting the Indians for the settlers, so they could go over the Appalachians into this very rich Ohio Valley, Ohio River Valley right there. That was very good for farmland and stuff. So what they do, like I said, they convened the Continental Congress, and finally they came up with the Declaration of Independence, which kind of lists the grievances against the king. What were the colonists interested in protecting? They were interested in protecting their liberty. Okay, specifically an independent judiciary, trade without restrictions, which was restricted by the English crown, and no taxation without representation. That was really what they were doing. Okay, there you see the Constitutional Convention and the authors of the Declaration of Independence, mostly Thomas Jefferson, that guy right there. So where did they get these ideas? That's the one thing that they need to look at. Where did they get the ideas that they think they could rebel and start their own government? Well, there was a lot of English philosophers and French political philosophers during the Age of Enlightenment, and they came up with quite a few things. Natural rights being one. Rights that were not given by government but were inherent in just being a human being. Okay, those are natural rights. The consent of the governed. The government derives its authority by sanction of the people, and limited government. Okay, which limited government is basically, no restrictions or restrictions on government to protect our natural rights. Now, they're thinking that if government isn't doing its job, which they didn't think the English Parliament was doing their job, then they had every reason to rebel, which was part of John Locke's, who was an English philosopher, creed was, if the government isn't protecting your rights, then those people have the right to rebel. Okay, so we're looking at John Locke. Let's look at him and the Declaration of Independence. And John Locke talked about natural rights, that the state of nature has a law to govern it, and he talks about life, liberty, and property. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, and then they also talk about equality, consent of the governed. Okay, all men are created equal. Consent of the governed, and limited government. And they also talk about the right to revolt, which came from Locke. Okay, men, if oppression makes men struggle, they need to cast off the uneasy and tyrannical yoke, which basically means get rid of the old government, make a new government. Okay, and that's basically where Thomas Jefferson, who was very well read, got his ideas for writing the Declaration of Independence. Okay, so basically the colonists felt that their natural rights were being denied, which was life, liberty, and property, and they needed to do something about it. Okay, they needed to make a legitimate government, which got which had the consent of the governed, and power was directly from a constitution, which was made by the people, and a protection of human liberty, which is a natural right, which predates their government. Okay, so 1783, we have the revolution. It goes on for a while, and we are winning our independence. 1783 is Treaty of Paris. 1781, basically the war ended. But 1783, the Treaty of Paris, and the colonies become the United States. And it was really a conservative revolution, which means it restored the rights to the colonists that they felt they had lost, but there wasn't any major change of lifestyle. Okay, there was no major political change, no major economics change, no major social change, which was much different than any other revolutions. Okay, you could say the French Revolution was, horrific, and there was a 10-year reign of terror after it. The 1917 Russian Revolution, where the Bolsheviks won power, changed it from a monarchy or the czar to communism, socialism. The Iranian Revolution was changed it from basically a monarchy to an Islamic state. Those were all, very unconservative revolutions. Ours was a very conservative revolution. We really didn't change much. We were just opposed to British rule, and now we were going to do something about it. And they're going to try a government of confederation. We'll talk about that in a sec. And we'll talk about what changed in the states, the economic turmoil that you see usually after a war because you have to pay all these debts. And we'll talk about the Constitutional Convention. Okay, so really the Articles of Confederation. In 1776, they basically came up with this idea that we actually need something to govern us if we're going to rebel and fight against the British. So they came up with the Confederation, the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation really was the first constitution in the United States. It was ratified in 1781 at the end of the Revolution. And basically it was a confederation among the 13 states or former colonies. The national government, meaning Congress here, there wasn't an executive branch or no federal court system. Congress had very few powers, okay, and it was very, very weak. All the power rested in the states. Now, that's pretty tough to run a country that way. So we're going to talk about the Articles of Confederation and why it really failed. Confederation is a system of government, confederal system, which means all the power resides in the regions or the states, and the central government or national government or federal government is very weak. In a federal system, which is what we have and what they changed in the new Constitution, that's when you have national government and state governments or regional governments that are sharing power. And then in a unitary system, the national government is the strong government. If there even is governments in the states, they're very weak. Okay, so what has changed with the Articles and what has changed after the war? There's more equality. Okay, more people get into government. Okay, it's not just for wealthy merchants and professionals and wealthy landowners. There's more of this idea of equality that is spreading through the United States now. More people got into government. More became state legislators after the Revolutionary War. Before, there was a lot of well-to-do and wealthy people. After that, more moderate income and farmers and merchants became active in the state governments. Okay, some of the reasons why the Articles of Confederation failed. National government wasn't strong, so a lot of states were bickering with each other and not treating each other's citizens right, and there wasn't one currency, United States currency. There was multiple currencies from the states. So it was very difficult for the states to get together and the Articles to actually govern these new states. A lot of economic turmoil too. There's post-war depression, which left a lot of people unable to pay their debts. A lot of farmers who were doing well during the war because they had to feed soldiers and stuff, and they bought more land and more tools to work the land. Well, they were in debt, and they were losing their land and their farms. And a lot of state legislators were sympathetic to the farmers. They passed laws that favored the debtors, which are the farmers, over the creditors. But there was some major turmoil